Forbes, born in Worcester, Mass, November 27th, 1920. Came to Omaha when I was 6 months old. We lived on North 20th Street. Our neighbors were the Garfinkels and the Lipmans and the Berg. The Berg was with the Associated Press. The Garfinkel's two daughters, one is now a Noddle, and one was a Smith. Mrs. Mary Smith died, and Noddle, Harlan Noddle's mother, is still living. We lived next door to Sklar's from the Sklar Radiator Company. We lived there till I was about 3 years old. And then we moved to 22nd and Willis Avenue. And we lived in a house my dad rented from Mrs. Foreman, who had a grocery store on 16th Street, but she had a home there that she rented, and we rented it. My dad was in the bakery business, went to work for Adler's Bakery when he first came to Omaha. My father and Mr. Adler was my father's uncle, my grandmother's brother. And Art Adler was my dad's first cousin. And went to work for them, and my Uncle Morris was part owner of the bakery at that time. And then they had split up, and then my uncle, my father, opened up a bakery out on 24th and Miami Street. I don't remember the year, I couldn't tell you. But at one time they had 50 people working there. They had 14 bread routes. And I went to Lake School as a child, graduated from Lake, went to Tech High. But in the meantime, we moved from that house to 25th and Spalding Street.
Okay.
And I went to Druid Hill. Mother used to trade at Max Oberman's grocery store, Mary Feldman's father. And we lived on the street wasn't paved, it was a dirt street. And we used to walk to shul on all the high holidays. We had to walk with my father. We walked to and from the
Which one?
synagogue on 25th and Seward.
Okay.
My grandparents lived on 21st and Burdett. And so from shul, we used to go over there, have a lunch, and then we'd walk back home to 25th and Spalding. My grandparents belonged to the Beth HaMedrash HaGadol synagogue on 19th and Burt. And so then we'd walk over there once in a while also. I went to Tech in 1934, graduated in 1938. And I wanted to be a bookkeeper. I took bookkeeping and accounting in high school, but I applied for a few jobs, and a couple jobs couldn't get because I was Jewish. And one Jewish man told me he couldn't hire me, I should go to work for my father. And I won't mention names, we'll just forget that part. And so I helped my dad open up a bakery on 24th and Charles, because he closed up the bakery on 24th in Miami because there was a union, there was a bread strike, and they were selling bread for a penny a loaf. And we opened up a Dad couldn't compete with the big bakeries and the unions, so we closed it up. We went to 24th and Charles and bought Himmelblum's old bakery on 24th Street. And then Dad put together a little route among some of the people who were good friends of my dad, grocery stores like Plotkin's, Nachman Grocery on 19th Street. The guy up the street from there was Slutsky, I think. Sam, I think. And Steve Feldman over on 26th and Douglas. He had a little hole-in-the-wall place, but he took in my dad's things to sell. And then Dad had furnished bread for the Kirschenbaum brothers, who were delivering house-to-house bread, and my grandfather furnishing bread to him in his horse and wagon. And
What were your parents' names?
my parents' name was Isidore and Gertrude Forbes. And Dad came over, well, my mother came over first in 1914. She came over on the ship called Lusitania. I don't know the ship that my dad came over, but they both ended up landing in Boston, not New York. And
Where were they from originally?
my mother was from Postval, Lithuania, and my dad was from Lazda, I think it was Russia at that time, if I'm not mistaken. And my mother's name was Goldblatt, or Gold. It was changed to Gold when they came here. And Forbes was Forbestein originally. And that was changed by my Uncle Morris, who came here first. And he decided to drop the Stein off, and he became Forbes. And my dad, when we had the bakery on Miami Street, had himself there, and then he had his brother Jack Forbes working for him, Paul Forbes working for him, and he also was making bread for a fellow in Council Bluffs by the name of William Perlmutter, Bill Perlmutter, who had a house-to-house kosher bread route in Council Bluffs. And his son Dave worked for my dad over in the bakery there. But getting back to the bakery on 24th Street, why at that time, when I went to Tech, and I was a senior of 16 years old, was when I met my wife. And we started going together then. And we got married on September 1st, 1940. And we lived over in the housing project. And I worked in the bakery because I became a baker. And then the war started, and I worked at the bakery part-time, and I worked for Mr. Beidel, and had a cap factory making caps for the government during the war. I worked for him for a while. And then I went to work for the Omaha Steelworks on there, and I was making 150 millimeters howitzer shells on the machines. I used to have a night shift from 12 to 7 or something like that, I forgot now. And my wife used to make me up a little lunch every day, and I used to go to work. But I wanted to go into service, and I couldn't get her signature. But finally, she decided that maybe she'd let me go because I kept bothering her, and I joined the Navy. I joined the Navy in 1940, last part of 43 or 40, early 44, I can't remember. And I was in the Navy till 1946.
And what did you do in the Navy?
In the Navy, I started out boot camp at Farragut, Idaho. And from Farragut, Idaho, came home on a leave and went back to Bremerton, Washington for Cooks and Baker School. Got through with Cooks and Baker School, and they had a choice of either going into the Marines or going to submarines. And I took the submarines. I didn't want to be a Marine. I didn't want to go to the Pacific Ocean, so I went in the submarines, and I went to New London, Connecticut, where I flunked out in the pressure tank. I passed out, and so they discharged me from the submarines, and I ended up on a ship called the, what the hell's the name of the ship? Anyway, we were towed. We looked like a baby flat top, and we had two 75mm machine guns, one on each end, and I was a baker on the ship. And we were towed by I can't remember what it was now, but we were towed from Chelsea Navy Yard in Boston through the Panama Canal into the Pacific. And then from Pacific, we spent 60 days in the Pacific Ocean, and we ended up at Pearl Harbor. At Pearl Harbor, we had 7 days rehabilitation leave, and from there we went to the Midway Islands, the Marshall Islands, and ended up at, well, in the meantime, we got caught in a typhoon, and we ended up in New Guinea. And then from New Guinea, we ended up in the Philippines. And in the Philippines, we had duty. We took aboard about 500 stevedores. And there was only 75 original complement from our ship, but we had 500, I think it was, stevedores who we fed and made place for them to sleep, and we had because they used to empty out the big boats and ships that came in. And then we had, did a little of taking care of a PT boat squadron who went out every morning to look for Japanese in and out those little, I don't know what you call them, canals or whatever you want to call them. And we used to bring them back, some dead, some alive. And then I finally got enough points to get out. And I was given a choice of becoming a chief petty officer or going home, and I went home. And that was in March or April of '46, I think. And we went home and landed at Treasure Island in San Francisco. And 5 of us sailors, we went to the Mark Hopkins Hotel, and we rented a suite of rooms, and we ordered a barber, and we ordered up all the fresh fruit and milk we could get. And we spent 3 days there, or 2 days there, I remember, 2 or 3 days. And then, on the way home from the Philippines, shot dice for 2 weeks. And everybody was making a lot of money, was having a lot of fun, and all of a sudden, all the money, the last guys who won had the money. Us early winners had nothing. Got to Frisco, I had to call home for money, and my wife sent me some money, and stayed there 3 or 4 days, I think. Then went to Treasure Island, and they told me I have to go to the Great Lakes to get discharged, but they gave me 2 weeks home. So I went home, got the wife, and my mother-in-law, who was living in Chicago at that time. She met us and gave us her apartment to use while we stayed there. And then I went to Great Lakes and got discharged and came back, and we stayed there for a couple of weeks.
Tell us about your siblings.
My children?
No, your family before your brothers and
Oh.
brothers.
Well, my dad came a family of, we had my Zeta and my Bobby. My Zeta used to deliver bread, but in the old country, my Bobby was a baker. And he didn't do too much work, I guess, over there. And he came over to America once and went back. Then my Uncle Morris came over, and he's the one who brought everybody over eventually. They all came over. But my dad had, see, it was my dad, Uncle Morris, Jack, Paul, Irving, and my Aunt Gertie on my dad's side. On my mother's side, there was only one brother that I ever met. That was Uncle Morris. He was a tailor, and he lived in Brooklyn, New York, on Gun Hill Road. The rest of the family, my Bubba and whoever was left, lived in Postval, in Lithuania, which was wiped out in March of 1941. I found that out through a book in the library, at the Jewish library. And my uncle was in the bakery business, and he moved to Texas, to San Antonio, Texas. And he went to the races. He was a racehorse buff. And he won $300 on a daily double and bought a bakery. So he bought a bakery in San Antonio, and that was when I was, I'd say about 12 years old. So my dad wanted to go down and see how the bakery was, what kind of bakery he bought for $300. So my brother, my oldest brother, Herbie, and my dad and I, we got in a Chevy and we drove to San Antonio. In those days, it was gravel roads and some maybe cement, mostly gravel. And we drove down to San Antonio, and he had a bakery, a Jewish bakery. There was, all bakers were Mexicans, but they know how to make Jewish bread, and they made good bread. And they had a house, and the first thing my aunt told me, you can't go underneath the porch because there's rattlesnakes. So we never went underneath the porch. And we went there, so we went sightseeing, and we went to the Alamo, and we saw Lackland Field and the other airfield there, and Breckenridge Park, and we saw all that stuff. And then we came back home. My dad said it was a good bakery, and my uncle did real well, and he opened up a delicatessen and bakery afterwards. And my Uncle Jack went down there and worked for him. My Uncle Paul moved back to Philadelphia, where he originally came from. And my Uncle Irv stayed in Omaha and owned a furniture store in South Omaha. And my Aunt Gertie and her husband, who was Mike Colton, and they had 3 sons, Irvin, Freddie, and Martin. And they had a clothing store on 24th and Lake. And when Brandeis used to sell Lee overalls on special, everybody from the Forbes family had to go buy overalls and give it to him so he could sell them, because he couldn't buy them because Lee only sold to Brandeis. So everybody from Forbes just go down, we buy overalls and bring it to my uncle. I had 2 brothers and a sister. I had Herbie and sister Annette and my youngest brother Marshall. My brother Herbie passed away when he was, about 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was. And they moved down to Florida, and he really didn't get to enjoy it. He only lived three weeks after they got there, and he died. He had a massive heart attack, passed away. And I worked with my dad as a baker, and then when I came home from the service, I went to work for him for a while, and then we moved and had a bakery on 50th and Underwood. On 50th and Underwood, there wasn't enough there for 3 families, so I opened my own bakery in Benson. And I worked there for 1954 to about 1958, I think it was. And then I sold myself and all my equipment to Harold Cooperman and opened up a bakery for him on 72nd and Blondo for 1 year. And after I got through in a year, I left there and I went into the insurance business. And I worked for Guardian Life for a while, and then I moved over and worked for Metropolitan Life Insurance. And in my travels, I used to call on McKesson Liquor trying to sell them group insurance. And the manager there was a fellow by the name of Lou Semino. And instead, he sold me on going to work for him. And I went into the liquor business, and I stayed in the liquor business for over 30 years. And then I worked for them for about 4 years. Then I worked for Sterling Liquor for about 4 years. Then I went to work for United Distilleries, and I finished up about 26 years with them, I think, something like that. And then when I went on disability when I was 1983. I had a bad heart and had to go on disability because the boss was afraid for me to be working and staying on the street. He didn't want the responsibility, so I went on disability in 1983.
And tell us about your children.
And I have 3 children. I have Karen, Leslie, and Bruce. We had another son between Leslie and Bruce who passed away, and he died probably 5 or 6 days after he was born. But we had an autopsy done on him, which saved my last son, Bruce, for what they found what was wrong with the boy that caused him to die was the lungs. Then when the next child we had, they knew just what to do to save Bruce. And it worked. And my dad and I, we took the little boy's body out to Fisher's Farm, and we buried it out there. Karen lives in California, and she has 3 children, a boy, a girl, and a boy. And we have 3 grandchildren there, and 5 great-grandchildren there. And Karen's divorced. Leslie's married to Bill Cully, who is not a well boy. And my son Bruce is divorced, and he's been with a woman now for 7 or 8 years now. I've been going with her. Not married, but Bruce did have 1 son with his first wife, who lives in California. And that's about all. Anything else you want to ask?
Anybody?
Did I cover everything for you? Anything you'd like to know?
Irv, tell us a little bit about some of the Jewish businesses along 24th Street when you were there.
Oh, along 24th Street? Okay. I'll tell you, we'll start out at Cumming Street going north. The first business I can remember was Mr. Sam. He had a garage and he made brooms. Friedel? Mabel, his wife, is here in the home. She was, he had a garage where he fixed cars, but he also made brooms. It was part of his business. What the hell was Shim, first name was Shim, not Sam. And he has a daughter who married to a Nog. Donald Nog, I think she's married to. And then we'll go down farther down the street. And let's see, we had the Pool Shoe on one side. And there was a grocery store in there, but then we had Usum's grocery store. Remember Usum's grocery? Then on the other side we had Crown's Fish Market. And then across on the corner of 24th and Hamilton we had Flack's liquor store or bar, or whatever. And he also had a fish place, I think, if I remember right. Didn't he have fish in there? Flack's?
Well, just for a short time.
Huh?
Very short time.
But he did have it there originally. Then up the street we had the Schwitzbud, run by Mr. Krantz on 25th and Hamilton. And then we go down to Charles Street, and between Hamilton and Charles we had Kaplan's hardware store, and we had Katz's hardware store. And then we go to Charles Street on 24th and Charles. On the corner was Merritt's drugstore. And then we had Wolf the tailor, Weinberg the barber, and then we had Friedman the shoeman, and then next to him was Diamond's butcher shop, and then there was an alley, and next to the alley was Crown's shoe store. Across the street we had Mayfried's Delicatessen, had Forbes's Bakery, Royal Bakery was called at that time, and right next alley was Adler's Delicatessen. And then we had a great big garage, belonged to Dansky's garage originally, and the last tenant in there was Epstein, who made barbecue, Epstein the barbecue. Across the street we had, on the corner we had Fellman's grocery store. What's her name? She's married to the attorney. Eunice, not Eunice.
Denenberg.
Denenberg.
Yeah.
Mrs. Denenberg, his wife was a Fellman. They had the grocery store there. And next to them we had Kyman's drugstore. And then we go across the street, and there was another drugstore, and I can't remember who owned that one. But then we had Chicago Bakery there, Abrams Chicago Bakery. Across from them we had the Ice House, and next to the Ice House was Sugar's butcher shop. And then across from them we had Belz's grocery store. And then we had, what's his name's, the other butcher shop.
Glass.
Glass, Morton Glass, yes, he was in the store today, son. Morton Glass's father was there. And then next to him was Ratner's, 2 doors down. Ratner's, she had a store, a grocery store, and all the kids lived there. All the Ratners, they lived in there, upstairs and downstairs. And all the boys, they opened up a auto place over on 24th and off of Harney. I can't remember if it was up there. And then we had Adler's Bakery. And then across from Adler's there was a grocery store. On one side was, it ended up belonging to Benny Blatt. And then across from them was another store, was a clothing store, no, not a clothing store, a tailor shop. Schneider or Bernstein, can't remember now.
Jake Burstein?
Jake Bernstein, that's right, right there. And next to him was Italian shoe shop, Pomodoro. And across from them was a drugstore that was owned by Robinson, the guy who made F&F cough drops. Yeah, he's the one who started F&F cough drops, moved to Chicago. In fact, his daughter married a niece of my aunt, my wife's aunt. And then next to them was Sal Lewis store, original store. Then we had the Alhambra Theater. And on the same side was Dolgoff's Hardware, and across the street was the Star Store. I don't know if you remember that. Star Store, yeah, yeah. And then across from them was a grocery store by. He ended up moving to 33rd Street, but he had a store that was named, begins with an R, can't think of it. Then you go down farther, and then we had Fellman's on this side originally, was Fellman's on the east side, when the old man was living. And then when, I think Sal Fellman, when he opened up on the opposite side. He took over a bunch of little stores. But going back to where Usum was, on the east side of the street where they built the housing, there used to be a bakery store there, Schultz Bakery, a Jewish guy, and there was also a butcher shop by the name of Beanstein. And that thing. Then on 20th and Clark, we had another bakery, Baker's Bakery, where a baker one night got caught in the mixer and got killed. Yeah, he got rolled up in that. And next door to him was Mark's Butcher Shop. Mark's Butcher Shop was there. They lived on 21st and Burdette, next door to my Bubba, Zeta. And they had Leo Marks and Herbert Marks and Rita Marks, 3 children. And next door to them on 20th Street was the Ideal Bottling Company, which eventually moved to Cummings Street, 24th and Cummings up there. But they started out on 20th and Clark. And across from them was Sklar's, and down the street, Mr. Reiches used to have his bottle company originally, till he sold out the building to 7-Up. And on 20th and Grace, I think we had 4 grocery stores on each corner. Yeah, I think there was 4. Because 19th Street, we had your father and Slutsky or whatever his name, I can't remember, up on 19th and Paul. And your father was down to the middle. And let's see, I got as far as, I'm almost to Burdette. No, then we had Mickle Lumber on 24th and Burdette. And they were big. And then across the street, well, we had a lot of we had a liquor store and and then we had Friedlander's grocery store on 24th and Lake, next door to Liggett's drugstore on 24th and Lake. And across the street was Tuckman's grocery store on 24th and Lake. And on the other corner was Bueller Brothers. And next to Bueller Brothers was Peterson's Bakery. And across from Peterson's Bakery on the east side was my uncle's clothing store. And next to him was Pittler's Plumbing, had a store. Pittler Plumbing had an office store. And next to them was the Greek guys selling hot dogs, American Coney Island or something like that. And then we had the World Herald on the corner for the paper boys. And across from them was the Crafts, she had more of a second-hand clothing store. Izzy Kraft and Leo Kraft. Leo Kraft's son has Mark Kraft, Leo, that's where Leo Kraft lived, and Nate Kraft lived. All the boys, they all lived there. They had a father who was, I think today you'd say he had Alzheimer's. But in those days you didn't know from that. And we're getting down. And then we had the post office on Ohio Street. Kaplan had a gasoline station on 24th and Ohio. And then we had a bicycle shop. And then we got down Miami, we had the bakery. That's about the best I can cover for you.
Very,
What else would you like to know?
wow.
That's excellent.
Huh? That covered pretty good?
That really does, yes. Now you ought to do those pictures.
This picture is myself and my beloved wife of 60 years. This picture was taken in 1981 at a bar mitzvah.
Kaiman?
This is
No.
my grandson Eden and his wife Mia with our great-grandson Eden Jacob from California. This is my granddaughter Linda and her two sons Tyler and Garrett, and there are two great-grandsons also from California. This is our oldest grandson, Brent, and his wife, this is our oldest grandson, Brent, and his wife, Cheryl, and son, Matthew, and our only great-granddaughter, Amanda, and those are two great-grandchildren, and they're all from California. All right? Okay. This is a wedding picture taken at our grandson's wedding, Tim and Denise. I'll start at the left. And Jerry, I can't see on here. And Jerry, my daughter Karen, Bill and Leslie Cully, Tim and Denise, Ida and Irv Forbes, our great-grandson Tyler standing in front of us, our granddaughter standing next to me, my granddaughter Linda, and in front of her is Garrett, and next to her is her brother Jason, our grandson, and next to him is another grandson Josh, and my son Bruce. I couldn't see the ones on the other side. I would like to discuss North 24th Street with the Jewish section about, say, 50 years ago or more. What I'm going to be talking about is what I remember, and I think I'm pretty well know what I'm talking about, but there could be some things that people won't agree with, but I'm going back when I was about 6 years old and so on, and from there on, I will talk about what's going on. There's some of the things here are newer than when they were then, but I'm going to start on the east side of the street from Cumming Street all the way to Lake. Then I'll go back and do the west side of the street all the way to Lake. I am going to go past Lake though, because my father's bakery was on Miami Street, was just past Lake Street. So I will start now. The first building that I remember was the Ida Bottling Company. Now they used to be on 20th and Clark when Mark's had the butcher shop there, and then they moved to 24th and Cumming. The Kyman and Platt Ideal Bottling Company. Next door to them, going north, was Shim Friedel, who had a broom factory and an auto mechanic shop. He made brooms and he did auto mechanic repairing. And next door to him, there was a sheet and metal shop, which I don't remember the name, but it was there. On Izzer Street, on the corner, was a gas station. And then go to Nicholas Street, and we have the Kapula Shul. I started my Talmud Torah at the Kapula Shul when I was 6 years old. And my teacher was Mr. Horowitz, and he had about 10 or 12 of us who he taught after school. And after Kapula Shul, there was a building there with A.A. Usim had a grocery store. And that's going back quite a few years. And next door to him was the Holy Roller Church. And that was quite
exciting because as we got older, we used to sneak down to watch them, the noise and what they used to do in this Holy Roller Church. You wouldn't believe what went on. But that's what it was. And next door to Holy Rollers was Spiegel's Junkyard. And I think that's what they called it in those days, a junkyard. Today they have fancier names for it. And then there was an empty lot, and that was Paul Street. Now we're starting on Paul Street, and this is before the housing project, and there was a Schultz Bakery and Beanstein's butcher shop. And that was probably, oh God, that's 60 years ago, I bet you. And then after that, we had a gas station on the corner of Charles Street. And next, going down, was May Fried's Delicatessen. And then we have Himmelblum's Bakery at that time. And my father bought Himmelblum's Bakery out quite a few years later, as well as May Fried's Delicatessen. And then we had Adler's Delicatessen. Mr. Adler was quite a character. He had jars of things that he pickled for years, and he kept them, and big jars. And he had his pickle barrel in the middle and his herring barrel in the middle. And even when it was hot in summertime, he still kept them out there. Then he'd stick his hand into the pickle barrel to get you a pickle. He was quite a character. Then after Adler's Bakery on Seward Street on the east side was Dansky's Garage. And that was a great big garage. Years later, the Epstein family had a barbecue place there. Art Epstein and his father, they had a barbecue place there. And across the street was an ice house. And then we come to Schuchert's Butcher Shop, which was probably the biggest kosher butcher shop. And there was Mr. Schuchert and his 4 or 5 sons and a daughter, Rose, who were all butchers, and they worked in their butcher shop. And right across the hallway from the butcher shop was Mrs. Morris and her cheese. She used to sell cottage cheese and butter and things like that. And right down the street from them was Stoller's Fish Store. And right next to Stoller's Fish Store was Glass's butcher shop. And he was a good friend of my father, and he was running up and down the street to my father all the time. And then we had Ratner's Grocery. There were a few other stores in between, but I don't really remember who they were. But then Ratner's Grocery there for years, and she raised a family there, and they lived upstairs and had a store downstairs. And right on Clark Street, on the corner, was Bernstein's tailor shop. And next to the tailor shop was Pomodore's Shoe Repair. He was there umpteen years. I really don't remember, but he raised his whole family there. Nunzio Pomodoro, the clarinet player, was his son, and they lived in back of the shoe shop. And then you had the Crosstown Pawn Shop, which was the Belmonts. Now, in between the Pomodoros and the Crosstown Pawn Shop was another ice house. And I think, if I remember right, that was run by a relative of the Belmonts, but I'm not sure, don't remember his name. And after that, we get to the Star Store, which was like original Woolworth store. That's where everybody went to get their ribbons and stuff, needles and thread, and that was right there. And right next to the Star Shop was a beauty shop. And then farther down the street, we come to Feldman's Grocery, and he was there, and he had 3 sons, or 4 sons, and they all worked in the grocery. And then we had the Ritz Theater. That was a new theater. There was another one, we'll talk about that later. And then there was a bar, and right on the corner of 24th and Burdett, we had Micklin's Lumber Company, and they were a big lumber company. And Louis Micklin was the owner, and they had a real big big lumber yard. Then right down the street was the Greenland Dance Hall, and that was upstairs, and on the bottom was some individual stores, and that was on Willis Avenue. And right across the street from Greenland was Jensen's boxing gym, where Barney Ross came, and he trained when he was champion. He also trained at the Jewish Community Center for a while. And we had a few good Jewish boxers in those days. We had Maury Schlafer, and we had a Kaplan fella. And in those days, when they were hungry, they were boxing to make money. And then we had Enholm and Sherman Laundry right between Willis Avenue and Lake Street. And on the corner of Lake Street, on one side, we had Tuckman's Grocery. And then my uncle had a clothing store, Colton's Dry Goods, and next door to him was Pittler Plumbing. And then we had a World Herald station, and then we had a Greek American cafe who specialized in hot dogs. In Ohio Street, we had E. Dorn Bicycle Shop. And then we had Kaplan's gas station on 24th and Ohio, and the block down was my father's bakery on Miami Street. Now that takes care of the east side. Now we're going to do the west side. On the corner of Cumming Street on 24th, there was a drugstore on the corner. Next door to the drugstore was a fire station. Now from the fire station to Indiana Avenue, there were homes built up on a high terrace, very high terrace. So we get to Indiana Avenue, right on the corner was a grocery store. And the next block was Caldwell Street, and there was a vacant lot. Now between Caldwell Street and Hamlin Street, we had J.P. Kranz's Fish Market. And they were almost on Paul Street, right across from Paul. And then we had a used furniture store on the corner. Then on 24th and Hamilton, we had Sam Flax's bar. And inside his bar, he had Finkelstein's fish store. And some combination, fish and drink, but I guess that was all right. And then we had, as we go down the street, we had Saporn's Grocery, and we had Mrs. Stein's Delicatessen. And then we had another Colton's Dry Goods store, which was a brother to my uncle. And then we had Kaplan's Hardware Store. Then on the alley, we had Hornstein's Grocery. And then next to Hornstein's Grocery was another hardware store, Katz's Hardware Store. And his daughter, I think, was married to Canner Edgar from the Bethel at one time. And then on the corner of Clark Street, there was a cafe. And then on the other corner, there was Landon's Grocery. And that was a big family from Council Bluffs. And we had Walk's Tailor Shop. And then we had Weinberg Barber Shop. And they've been there for very many years. And there was Friedman's Shoe Store. And next door to Friedman's Shoe Store, we had Diamond's Butcher Shop, who originally was from Council Bluffs, and they moved here to Omaha, and he opened up the butcher shop. And Mr. Diamond had 4 sons who were butchers in the butcher shop. Now across the alley was Kranz's Shoe Store. And next to Kranz's Shoe Store was Bondaren Dress Shop. A husband and wife, they had a dress shop. And they left sometime, I don't know, and they moved out of Omaha. Then we had Kyman's Drug Store, and then on Sewer Street we had another grocery store, and on the opposite corner we had another drugstore. And next to the drugstore we had Chicago Bakery, which was from the Abrams family. And then there was a shoe shine parlor, and then there was one non-Jewish family, Marsh & Marsh Grocery Store, and they were on Franklin Street. And across from them on Franklin Street, we had a liquor store, which was, I think, owned by the Stoller family. And then we had Adler's Bakery right on Decatur Street. And right across on Decatur Street was Frager and Fox Drugstore, and they later sold it to a fellow by the name of Robinson, but Frager and Fox became the F&F Cough Drops of America. They moved to Chicago and they became real big. Then we had the Sal Lewis Appliance Store, and right before radios come out in console models, Mr. Sal Lewis sold my father a fancy Victrola, and it wasn't very after that the radios came out in console models, and we were stuck with the Victrola. And then we had the Alhambra Theater. The Alhambra Theater, that's where everybody went in those days. That was before the Ritz Theater. And that's where we got to see Al Jolson and Sonny Boy. And all the Jewish people went to the Alhambra Theater. And right next door to him was Dolgoff's Hardware. Mr. Dolgoff, that family lived in Minnelusa, and they had a real nice, I remember, a real nice hardware store. There was two sons that I know of, and one was living in Denver and one lives here in Omaha, and Jacques Dolgoff is his name. And then across the street on Parker Street was Rubino's grocery store. And then there was a bar, and then we get down to Grand Street, and there was Matoya's Cafe. It seems like we had an awful lot of Matoyas in Omaha, and they were in all kinds of businesses. And right there was Friedlander's grocery store, Herman Friedlander, and his son was Mort Friedlander. On the corner of 24th and Lake was a drugstore, and next to across the street was Peterson's Bakery, and then we had a post office on Ohio Street. And I'll tell you, in those days, it came like on a Thursday night. All the Jewish women would do their shopping for Shabbos. They go down and get their chickens picked and flicked and killed and everything, and then they go get their fish, and it was like that every Thursday night. And then on Shabbos, the stores weren't open, especially bakeries and delis, because the rabbis wouldn't allow it, so they have to wait till after sundown to open up. And but you'd take Thursday, it was a big shopping night on 24th Street, and then on Saturday nights was shopping night, and then Sundays was a big day because they come from taking the kids to Sunday school and everything, and business was really booming. They do their meat shopping and everything. And streetcars ran down the street. And we never had any problems with discrimination or anything, and everything was really good in those days. But things have changed. Thursday in the bakery was a big deal. We'd start at 1 o'clock on a Thursday night in the morning. And working in a bakery in those days wasn't an 8-hour job. It was anywhere from 10 to 14 hours a day, because everything was handmade, and you had to sit and wait for the doughs to come. And we had one baker, when he came in the morning, he used to get the Sam Flaxes and buy so many quarts of Schlitz beer, and when he drank up the Schlitz beer, that was time to go home. And but all the doughs, especially in summertime, would come faster, so they had to work faster. But in the wintertime, it took a little bit extra time. But on Thursday night, we used to make all the challahs, and we used to braid challahs, 6 braid. And then we'd make mandel bread, kichel, everything they needed for Shabbos. And Friday was a busy day in the bakery. People would come from all over the city to the Jewish people at that time, because as people started to move away from this area, why they still wanted their kosher stuff for Shabbos. And so we had to make all those things that they wanted for Shabbos, honey cakes, and we used to make what we call a vanilla drop cookie. One side we'd do with chocolate, and on the other cookie we'd do with white icing, and we made our own strudel, and what else was we used to make, I said honey cake. We used to make a mandel bread, and we were making mandel bread chocolate and white. Then we had some people who wanted just white, and then you had some people who wanted just chocolate. So we used to make everything we could do. But they would come in to buy all their stuff till Sunday. And on Sunday was another busy. It was probably busier than Friday, because on Sunday we made bagels. We only made bagels one day a week. And on Sunday we made bagels, we made onion pretzels, and we made a special kind of pumpernickel called health bread, which you only get on Sundays. And made all the Kaiser rolls and everything, but everything was made by hand, nothing by machine. And you used to work 10 to 14 hours a day in the bakery. It wasn't an easy thing. Reliable clothing company, and that was Gitlin and Schwartz, and I left them out, and we're in between the Federal Market and Katz's hardware store. And I don't know if it's a son or nephew of Schwartz, but they're the ones who opened up the grocery store Walnut's grocery store on 50th and Leavenworth. This is the Mushkin and Epstein Meat Market, and they were located on 1400 North 24th Street, and that's on the side where they made the housing project. They tore those buildings down. They were there a long, long time, and there was a picture, there was a bakery there called Schultz's Bakery. This is a picture of the Federal Market, Kiwi Hornstein and Sam Saporn, which they later split up, and Sam opened up his own store. But this is right on the alley of 24th between Hamilton and Charles. This is Himmelblum's Bakery, and that's Mr. Himmelblum. And he was there for a good many years, and always did a real good job. And in later years, my father bought the bakery from him, and also bought Mayfree's Delicatessen that was next door. This is another picture of Ben Himmelblum and two of his bakers. As you can see, he was a real tall man, and he was a tall guy in his business, and a real nice man. He treated his customers fairly. This is Mr. Adler from Adler's Delicatessen on the other side of the alley of the Himmelblum Bakery, and he was there as long as I can remember, because I remember when I was a kid, we used to go in there and he'd dig his hand into the barrel and give you a pickle, and he had things, watermelon pickled and everything pickled in great big jars, and when you walked in, it had a smell of delicatessen. Feinstein and Lippman Kosher Butcher Shop. They were down in the area where the Schucherts were, and they're from old ones though. They went out of business probably, I'd say, when I was probably 10, 12 years old. I think they were gone. This is an ad that Feinstein and Lippman Kosher Meat Market had, and as you can see, we had clean corned beef for 40 cents a pound, and rolled smoked meat for 40 cents a pound, corned beef briskets for 60 cents a pound. Things were a lot different in those days, but they all sold and made a profit, so I guess everything was okay. Adler's Bakery, their big thing was delivering to restaurants, and they had I think the bulk of the restaurant business all sewed up with them. They used to cater for a bakery for restaurants. But they also did a big job on the weekends with bagel and pretzels and everything. Mr. Adler was quite a baker himself, And Art Adler was right with his father all the time. This is a picture of Chicago Bakery, and I think they were probably one of the earliest Jewish bakeries in Omaha, and on 24th Street. And Mr. Abrams had 3 or 4 sons, and they did a nice job, but they didn't do a lot of delivery business. They were mostly walk-in trade. In those days, why people used to come in every day for a loaf of bread. It isn't like today, they buy it and they keep it for a month or a week. They used to come in every day for a loaf of bread. And that's how they survived in those days. This is my father, Isidore Forbes, from the Forbes Baking Company. This was taken on 24th in Miami. And Dad was the opposite of the Adlers. He went for grocery store business, where the Adlers went for restaurant business. And he had 14 trucks on the street at one time. He had 50 employees. And the unions knocked him out of business. That was it.